We're going to talk about court records. For virtual folks, I've got the handout link in the chat. For in-person people, y'all grab the handout over there. So we'll go ahead and get us started here. So I like to just preface this session by saying I'm not a lawyer. I know about as much of the law as you guys might, so I'll try my best to answer your questions and explain things in lay terms, but realize I am not a lawyer either. So you might be wondering, well, why should I use court records for my genealogy research? They are a valuable and often overlooked resource because if you think about it, each time a person interacted with a city, a county, a state, or a federal court, a record was created. So this helps you place your ancestor in a specific time and a specific place, which you can add to their timeline. So, between the census years from 1910 to 1920, is my ancestor still living in the same place? Are they still living in the same house? Maybe you don't have city directories or something to help pinpoint your ancestor. This might be another resource that could help you pinpoint them. And then once you have that specific place, now you know, hey, I can explore other records in this area at this time period. And then you get some great context for their lives. So it can give you lots of really interesting information, sometimes more than maybe you want to know about some of your ancestors. But some of the good things it can do is it can help establish family relationships and a place of residence. So where those family members were living, where those ancestors were living to help, map out that area and maybe give you clues. They can also provide occupations, descriptions of individuals, and other excellent family history information. They can also help you see who's in your ancestors' fan club. And if you're not familiar with the fan club, that stands for family, friends, acquaintances, and neighbors. So these are all people in your ancestor's life that you want to look more into because your ancestor might also appear in their records. Maybe that family friend or that acquaintance or that neighbor is a witness to something, and then vice versa, your ancestor is a witness to something on that person's record. So again, it's another place that you can go explore more. And sometimes people that you think are just acquaintances or friends end up being in-laws or related in some way. So sometimes if you're having difficulty finding a married name or a maiden name of one of the females, look at some of these people that are listed on the records and find out who those people are because they might be also relatives of you. Of course, court records might give you some more insight into our ancestors' sometimes complicated lives. These might be some of the juiciest tidbits that you can find in your family history. Unfortunately, though, these things might not be things that you want to know about your ancestor, or it might put them in a bad light. Like if your ancestor was accused of murder, that's, pretty big. Not something that, you want to think, oh, my ancestors, did that or were accused of this. So, of course, be aware that, once you go down that path and start looking at some of these records, you might uncover some things or some details that are a little tougher to hear or read. They can also be alternative records to help you fill in different gaps about your family. So, for example, you might be able to see birth dates for minor children, and maybe it's a time when there weren't birth records or you can't find that birth record for those children. Now you have birth dates listed in these court records, and now you've got, some proof that that's when that child was born. Sometimes, of course, our ancestors are committed to a mental institute. So you might be able to find, evidence of this. And, maybe they don't have the admission paperwork anymore from that institution or any further details because maybe those records were destroyed for obviously privacy reasons. But one of these court records could help shed some light on that experience of that individual. So just quickly, I'm going to talk about the U.S. court system. Of course, with the broader court records topic, I'm really more so focusing on U.S. courts. I will talk a little bit about international court records and how to find those. But for the most part, we're going to focus on U.S. because we live in the United States and that's what I'm most familiar with. So the U.S. court system, of course, going back to colonial times, was based on the common law of England. So that was based on what's called precedent. It's basically decisions in previous similar cases. But that can be superseded by statutory laws, which are those laws that those governing bodies enact or put into law. I thought this was interesting that up until the Civil War, people could be criminally prosecuted for crimes such as gossiping, witchcraft, scolding a husband, being publicly disrespectful to a minister, and refusing to attend church services. So, although these are kind of funny reasons and things we wouldn't consider a crime nowadays, this just shows you that laws are varying by the different time periods, different place. So it's really important to understand what the laws are in place in regards to when your ancestor is being in court and understanding, oh, they might have gotten in trouble for scolding their husband because that was a law during that time. Something that maybe a lot of us have already done, recently, but is not a crime anymore. And court wasn't just for bringing criminal cases. Of course, that's probably what most of us think right away is, oh, my ancestor was a criminal. They're in the court records, or they were the black sheep of the family. But lots of other things were handled through the U.S. courts. Naturalization, which we talked about last year, for our immigrant ancestors, that is all handled by the court system. Divorces, land records, those are also handled through the courts. So divorces, we talked way early last year in our marriage and divorce talk that you can see that recording on YouTube, as well as that naturalization talk is on YouTube. And then in April, we're going to talk all about land records and how to use those in our genealogy research. But again, that's a type of court record. And then probate records, we're going to talk way more in depth on that next month because that's a whole session on its own. That's all handled by the court system. And local courts also issued licenses to specific occupations. So the lawyers, the physicians, the merchants, midwives, ferry operators, clergy, all those kinds of occupations. If your ancestor was one of them, they would have had to get a license, and then you would have that record created through the U.S. courts that you could find. Of course, there's going to be various types of courts, various types of records, depending on that time period. So where you're going to find your ancestor is going to depend on what types of cases they would have been involved in and what time period we're looking at. So, for example, if your ancestor made counterfeit money, that's a federal crime because it's, ripping off the U.S. Treasury. So that's going to be tried in federal court. But if your ancestor, got a speeding ticket, that's going to be something that's more handled locally. So you're not going to look in federal court records for that. Each jurisdiction has its own restrictions and the different access limitations. So you need to be familiar with what area you're researching in and that time and what's available because, something like colonial time in Pennsylvania is going to be completely different in 1920 in Wisconsin. So, some of those records might be online, some of them might be completely sealed or offline. It really depends depending on where you're searching and what time period you're searching. The court names and jurisdictions of those counties and states might have also changed throughout time because, that makes it fun and interesting for us genealogists. And some of those county boundaries might have changed, as those states are becoming states and settling out their counties. One county might have started as a county by this name, and then 10 years later, it broke off into two different counties. So I have a great resource for you to see some of those county boundaries. For those of us in Wisconsin, it's completely free. It's called Heritage Quest, and I'll show you how to get to it from the APL website. So under Research and Learn, we're going to click on Genealogy and Local History. And then this is an alphabetical list. So if we're looking for Heritage Quest, we're going to go down to the H's, and you can see Heritage Quest online.
Where did you start?
apl.org, and then under Research and Learn. Yeah, so you need to go to apl.org. So here we are at Heritage Quest. It's going to bring you to Badger Link, which is a statewide resource. You just click on that link. So that makes it free for everybody in Wisconsin. For you virtual folks who might not be in Wisconsin, definitely check with your local library and see if you have access to it. But this is a great spot to learn about some of those county boundary changes. So if you go under Maps, it is going to pull up this map guide to the federal censuses, and it's going to show you some of those boundary changes between 1790 and 1920. So basically what you do is you just click on a state. So say, hey, I'm searching in Iowa. I want to see what the boundaries are in Iowa. So it's going to start with whatever year it has. So you can see what Iowa looked like in 1840 and then go to 1850 and see all the things that are changing. So kind of what's in black is during this time period, and the information in white behind it is current boundaries. So you can see, hey, if you have an ancestor in Hancock County, it's not in existence yet in 1850. So it might be a part of a different county. And then down here, it sometimes gives you a little bit more description, like, what county was broken off from what county and what time period that happened. And so a real great resource for any of the US states for you. Yeah, yes. Another great way is to start with the Family Search Wiki. So this kind of helps you understand the court system, the different types of courts, what cases are going to be held within those courts in that specific area that you're researching in, and during that time period when your ancestors are there. So I always go to the Family Search Wiki and I'm going to search that name of that state and the word court records, or that name of that country and court records. So for example, I'll show you the Family Search Wiki. So right here, it's a resource that's listed in your handout, or you can just Google Family Search Wiki. This is where you'd put in Wisconsin court records. So right here is that first result, Wisconsin court records. And now it's going to give me some information like, hey, there's some online resources. Here's some information you need to know about researching Wisconsin court records. Sometimes they're extensive, sometimes it's just basic, or they're linking you to other resources. You can do the same thing with countries. So I can put in Sweden court records. And now I can see, oh, there's a couple online resources. Here's some information about some offices to contact, different background information, different court types. They even go more in depth based on the time period. So again, some of them are a little bit more extensive than others, but it's a good starting point for learning to research court records in that specific location. Because again, every place is going to be a little bit different. I also really love this book. It's called Courthouse Research for Family Historians by Christine Rose. It is from 2004, which was quite a while ago now, 22 years ago almost. But it still has a lot of really great information, some really great chapters on the basics of courthouse research. Of course, they're making some reference to some old outdated things like CD-ROMs, and a lot more of these records are going to be online than there was in 2004. But it's still a great resource to check out. We do have it in our InfoSoup catalog, so you're welcome to put it on hold if you live locally and check it out. I also encourage you to use Google or whatever search engine is your favorite to learn more about that area that you're researching in. So what are the different jurisdictions? How is the court system in that area laid out? So you can see on this little snapshot over here, I've just got the Google page. It's got a little AI overview. I just want you to be aware that that might not always be 100% correct, so don't rely on that. You want to look at the different websites. So what the AI overview is doing, it's taking a bunch of the websites and combining it into a little summary for you. I want to make sure that you're looking at the legit sources. So what you're going to do in that search engine is you're going to search that state or that country name and words like court jurisdiction or court system overview or court system. And you always want to look for a .gov website for the most accurate information. So I'll show you, this is what I searched for, court jurisdictions in Wisconsin. Again, we've got the AI overview. We've got a bunch of different resources down here that I can click on, and I'm looking for all those .gov resources to learn a little bit more. And then I know that those are legit government agencies that are giving me that information. So if that's where I'm starting my search, now I can learn a little bit more about the court systems in that area. I also encourage you to use Cindy's List. So we talked about this last month if you guys were here. This is a really great resource full of awesome free links. So she has all the links broken down by state or by country. And so each individual state you could click on, and then there's a laws and statute, or a government, or prison, or prisoners and outlaws areas. So there's different categories, but you can see all these different relevant links. So this example over here in the screenshot is showing Illinois. So you can learn more about the laws and statutes in Illinois by clicking on any of these links and then learning more on those websites that she's kind of curated for you. If you were looking at like prison records in Illinois, there's a separate category for those prisoners, and outlaws. You can, of course, use this site for a lot of other genealogy-related categories and those international categories as well. A reminder, again, we talked about this last month, and I showed a little demonstration of how to use the site. So if you missed that, go ahead and watch that video from last month. So now we're going to dive into how to specifically research in court records. So essentially, there are 3 levels of courts in the United States, all of which have various named courts underneath them. So the big overarching one is going to be the federal courts. So those are going to be cases involving violations of the U.S. Constitution or federal law. They could involve both federal and state laws, depending on what the content of those court cases are. They also hear a lot of court cases between U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens. You can see in your handout, I've got some more details about how to obtain some of those federal court records. Obviously, for most of us, our ancestors might not be involved in any federal court cases, but in case they are, I've got some resources in your handout for you. And then going down another level is state courts. So these are going to be appellate courts, trial courts, and they house superior courts and local or municipal courts. So the majority of these state cases are going to be civil or criminal, but they're going to be those kind of higher level crimes or higher level infractions. So when we're talking about civil, that's going to be a violation of a law when an individual is harmed. So essentially what the case is, it's one or more individuals or businesses is going to file suit against another individual or business to enforce some sort of private right or to receive compensation for a violation of rights. So you might see something like John Smith versus Joe Green, maybe John Smith is owed money from Joe Green, or something happened where they are suing each other. Criminal, though, of course, like I said, is kind of what most of our brains might go to when we think about court records. Criminal, of course, is going to be those violations of laws in which society is or may be harmed, like drunk driving, theft, murder. So when we're looking at the state level court cases, it's always the people that file suit against a defendant. And for the state level, it's going to be felony crimes, so something that's a higher level. So you might see something in the court records as State of Wisconsin versus John Smith. So it's the state bringing this case against John Smith. And then the third level is going to be that local or the municipal circuit court level. So these are lower courts that are usually held in a trial court, like a county court, a city, town, or village court, juvenile court, common pleas court. Again, there's multiple names depending on the jurisdiction. So these are going to be responsible for things like those records, those registrations that we talked about, those land records, probate, naturalization, those licenses that our ancestors would have been at that local court. Again, various types of cases, different names of courts. So that's why it's important to really start at that local level where your ancestor is living and see what records and what courts there are in that area, because this is going to be probably where you're going to find your ancestor. So like the state court, a lot of these local courts are going to hear those civil and criminal cases, but they're for less severe things like a traffic ticket or truancy. Of course, if they perhaps lose their case at the local level, they can appeal to a higher court, like the state court, and try to get them to side in their favor instead. So some common types of court records that you might find your ancestor in: wills and probates, which we're going to talk all about next month, very in depth; divorce, adoption, paternity, those different licenses we talked about; land records and property disputes. Again, we're going to talk about land records all in April; naturalization, debt, guardianship, appointment to public offices, some of those criminal charges like assault, murder, theft, etc., and much, much more. And again, the majority of these are probably going to be in local or circuit court records. But if your ancestor, maybe had to appeal to a higher court, or depending on the type of case, it might have been at the state level or at the federal level. Unfortunately, with court records, they can be a little bit more challenging than some of those other genealogy record types that we've talked about up to this point. The reason for this is that majority of them are not digitized, and if they are digitized online, they're not always indexed, or the index is a little bit difficult to use sometimes, or it's not properly indexed. I don't want that to discourage you, though. With a little bit of effort and some help from those staff that you would visit at the different repositories that would have these court records, you can locate your family. And there is some really great stuff online. And now with full text searching, which is a feature of the Family Search website that we'll dive into in just a second, more records can be found online. Unfortunately, there's only so much they can digitize, though, and put online. And, it's very time consuming if you think about all the different court cases that are held in a day in each county or each city all across the United States. That's a lot of court records. So they can't magically all be online just like that. So only a certain small subset of those records are going to be online at this time. Also, that what makes it difficult is the legal jargon. So I started this off by saying I'm not a lawyer. A lot of these legal terms that I've read in some of the court records that I've looked at for my own ancestors, I've had to try to interpret them myself. So what I usually do is I use Black's Law Dictionary. We have a book form of it here in the library, or there's a great website that I've got listed for you in your handout, where you can search a specific term that you see in a court record to figure out what in the world is this. So something like a guardian ad litem. I've heard that term and I was like, I have no clue what this is. And then it's going to give you a little definition. Well, it's the party the court deems responsible for an incapacitated, handicapped, or minor in court. Well, now I know it's kind of like somebody being that support system and being that adult for them. So you can search any of the terms here and it will give you some information. Sometimes you can even click on it and it will give you some more detail. This is going to give you a lot of ads right now. But some of them, go more in detail explaining this specific term. You can also use Google or another search engine. So I could have typed in that, what is guardian ad litem in there and saw what results come up. Again, be aware of that AI summary. Make sure you're using kind of legit sources like the Black's Law Dictionary to learn what those legal terms are. Sometimes also you might come across cases that are restricted for one reason or another. So it might be a case that involves guardianship or adoptions or minor children. Maybe it's got some potentially sensitive information, like that person was institutionalized or it deals with their medical information, that for some reason, for privacy, they're going to restrict those cases. Always be sure to talk to the staff at that place where you're trying to access that record and see, well, why is it restricted? Can I get some special permission because I'm a descendant from these people and I want to learn more? You might just need to prove that you're family or that the people are long deceased. Maybe you have to write a letter to the court, which is actually really simple. So a couple years ago, I had found reference to a case that was from like 1902, 1903 for my great-grandfather and his siblings who they had lost both their parents and then of course they needed to have guardianship. Well, of course, since the court case involved all minor children, they restricted that case. But of course, from it being from 1903, all these people are long deceased. All I had to do was write a simple letter to the court just saying, I'm a descendant of one of the people named in this case. I would like access to it. And I got special permission to have access to it. So it sometimes is really that simple. Sometimes, of course, like I mentioned earlier, they can have really sensitive or unexpected information that you might not want to learn about your ancestors. So you kind of want to know, hi, I need to proceed with caution if I decide to research in court records or certain court case types. Like if I know I'm looking in the criminal records, that might be some stuff that I don't want to learn. So usually you can see what kind of the charge was or what case type it is in an index, but sometimes some of that more sensitive information might be mixed in another case that you weren't expecting. So, for example, maybe you're just, hey, I'm going to look at a divorce court case for my ancestors, and all of a sudden the wife is, detailing this abuse that she got from her husband. That was something, that might not be unexpected and might have sensitive information for you. So just proceed with caution as you dive into these. Are there any questions so far before we talk about the different types of court records you might uncover? See if our virtual folks have any questions here. Let's see. Hopefully this sounds okay for you virtual folks. Some people are saying echo, some people are saying no echo, so hopefully that's working well for you guys. Someone pointed out the maps look like pages from Bowstruck and Dollarhide. I can't remember, it's Dollarhide and somebody else. I don't think it's Bowstruck, but there is a book that it is exactly those census pages. It is out of print, and you can find it used on Amazon, or you can use Heritage Quest as well. But it is that exact book that you're mentioning. Someone asked if a child is placed in a boy's home, would there necessarily be a court record? It depends on why he's being placed there. Is it because his parents are gone and he needed a guardianship? Is it because, he was just really sassy and, maybe did some damage to something? It really depends. You're going to have to dive a little deeper into those records and see if you can find records for that specific place as well. That might be like in a state archive or a local archive. All right. So now we're going to dive into a couple of the major types of court records. Of course, we could be here all day if I talked about every single type of court record, but these are kind of the broad, big ones that you're going to use to try to find your ancestors. So one of the big ones is a docket book. This basically lists all the cases that are going to be heard by a specific court. So once a case is brought about, it's placed on the docket until a trial happens. So usually in the docket books, you're going to find the plaintiff who's bringing the case about, the defendant who the case is against, the date that case is going to be heard, and then a case file number, which is really helpful when you're looking for more details. You want to write down that case file number, so you can locate that case file or other records that are related to that case. So these docket books are usually going to be in chronological order. They might be indexed, depends on the court. It might be harder to locate your ancestors unless you know a specific time period, though, because they're chronological. So if your ancestor lived in the same area for 30 years, that's maybe going through 30 years of stuff if it's not indexed. Hopefully it's indexed for you, that you can find out, specific time periods or specific pages where your ancestor is going to be mentioned. Or fingers crossed, maybe it'll be online for you and indexed that way. Most courts are going to keep their own dockets, but some courts decide to include multiple courts in one docket. So you might have guardianship court and probate court all in one docket, depending on the size of the courts, for example. So here's an example of a docket book that I found on Family Search from Georgia. So I'll just show you what it looks like in here. Anytime you're in Family Search, it's going to ask you to sign in with your free account. So if you don't have a free account, you want to get one. So if we zoom in, we can see this is what it looks like. So we're looking at this term. I think it's 1810, if I'm reading that correctly. So it's saying the state versus Thomas for simple larceny, and it's talking about the verdict is coming. The state versus so-and-so for this, and you're seeing the name of the case, so the plaintiff and the defendant, what the charge is, and then when it's going to be heard in the court case. Yeah, it might be 1810 or 1840. I can't quite. Sometimes that handwriting is more difficult, but sometimes if you go to this front part, it will also tell you, like you can see, this is court records from the Superior Court. Yeah, from 1836 to 1840. So now I know that is for sure 1840. Then we're also going to have minute books. So these are basically brief daily accounts that are kept by the clerk of the court of everything that's happening in the court. So all the actions that are taken. So it's really similar to what we just looked at in the docket, but it gives a lot more details. So again, you're going to see those names of that plaintiff and that defendant, and you're going to see a little brief description of what happened in court that day in regards to that case. Just like the dockets, they're going to be in chronological order for the most part. Unfortunately, sometimes they're not always indexed though, because if you think about it, this is a daily account. That's a lot of stuff to index. If it's not indexed, again, if you have a specific time period, maybe you want to skim through some of those years during that time period to see if you can find your ancestor, or if you happen to find reference to a specific case at a specific time period, now you know what time period to go to. So maybe you can get details from the docket or details from newspaper accounts or other records to help you more narrowly find in the minute books where you might find this record. Or, like I mentioned, with full text searching in Family Search, it also makes it a little bit easier to find some of these records that might not have been indexed. So here's an example of a minute book that I also found on Family Search. This is for Culpeper County, Virginia. So you can see it's a lot of handwriting. You got to read through. Okay, this is the following lists of fiduciary accounts. So we're seeing names of people listed and different, oh, this is a guardian, this is the children. And then, there's another paragraph about something. Oh, it's a will and testament being recorded, another will and testament being recorded. Oh, this motion happened in this court. So again, it's sometimes little brief snapshots of what happened in court that day. So it might give you just a little tidbit of what happened in court in regards to your ancestor's case. Then we have court order books. So these list specific judgments or orders of the court. So again, it's going to include a basic description of the case and what happened. So some of those details that are recorded in these court order books are actually maybe not always found in other court records. So say, for instance, your ancestor had to have a guardian appointed to them. They might only list that in a court order book and not anywhere else, depending on the court, how the court handles that case. Or maybe it's saying, oh, so-and-so was granted citizenship on this day. Well, it might be in the docket book or it might be in the court order book that's just that one or two sentence description of that case and what happened. These are thankfully usually indexed, but they might be limited. And just like some of the other court records, some of the courts kept a separate judgment books from the order books that we just looked at. Or these order books. The judgment books, those are more extensive summaries of the case and what happened. Sometimes you're going to find them together in one, though. So here's an example from Warren County, Kentucky that I also found on Family Search. So again, we're going to zoom in and see, okay, these are, the names of the cases. This guy's accused of chicken stealing. This guy's, larceny, sell worthless stock. You can see all the kinds of swearing. Wow, that was a crime at this time. You can see some of the cases and little bits of tidbit information. And then it's giving a reference to a page number or a case number where we would then want to follow up and see if we can get some more information on that specific case. So again, you might be able to find your ancestors in here, and then this will lead you to additional records on that case. But the real meat and potatoes that you want to look for is the case file. So this is kind of sometimes a packet or a bundle of all the different loose documents related to that specific case. So it might include copies of evidence, testimony, bonds, depositions, any correspondence, or any petitions that your ancestor would have filed or been included on if they were the defendant. So this is where you're going to find that most helpful family information. Unfortunately, this is the stuff that's less likely to be digitized because if you think about it, there's lots of cases. Not every court keeps every single case file because if they kept them all, they would never have enough room in whatever archive or courthouse they're stored in. Right now, for the stuff that's online, we see a lot of guardianships, a lot of probates. Those are most the common types that we see online, but you can find some of those other record types that we just looked at that might lead you to that case file that might be offline. And these case files, they can be really lengthy or really small. You know, it could just be a few pages or it could be 100 pages, depending on the type of case and what happened in that case, how long it went on in court, and the different, documents that they had to have in that case. So essentially what you want to do is you want to find a file case number so that you can locate that case file. So you can get it from the docket that we just looked at, the minutes, an index. It might be online, like we just looked at some of those examples that are online, or maybe it's just available in book form at that courthouse or at that archive that keeps those case files. So you might need to do a little bit of digging depending on where you're researching. Sometimes you will come across the case file just doesn't exist anymore, but you can look at some of those other record types to get a sense of what happened in that case and kind of piece together a little bit. It's not going to be as great as having the case file, but you at least have a little understanding of what happened in the case. So I've got an example of a case file that I found on Ancestry Library Edition from Washington. It's in the civil case files. So we can see it's kind of in a file folder. I can see the names of the plaintiff and the defendant. We've got a case file number and a date. And the archives usually has some sort of box or file number, folder number where they're going to keep specific cases because that's how they organize things. If you think about it, they've got thousands and thousands of cases. They need to, organize them in some certain way. So then you can just go page to page and you can see some of the documents that they have in here. You know, this is a complaint. So that's going to lay out what the case is about. So you can read through all the different case things that they're talking about in here. Of course, some of the handwriting is really awesome to read. Some is a little more difficult that you're going to have to spend a little bit more time reading this. But you can kind of go page to page. If this is something that's about your ancestor, you're going to want to save a copy of it. And you can see this one's just a couple of pages. Sometimes we'll get stuff that's printed like this in here. Sometimes we'll just get the handwritten stuff. So again, you just kind of scroll through and see what the case is about and read through all the fun stuff that they've got going on in here. And so that's the extent of this case. If I click on the next box, it's another file folder for a completely different case. So you saw that one was what, 4 or 5 pages. Sometimes they're just that simple. This one looks like it's a lot more than 5 pages. If I look ahead a little bit, you can see there's, maybe more than a dozen in that case file. So it again really depends on what specific type of case it was and what happened. I've also got an example of one that I found offline. This was a bankruptcy case between my second great grandparents and the place that they own or owed money to for their house. So I found this offline at UW Green Bay. They have an area research center that's all throughout the state that Oconto County, where my ancestors were living. They have some of those old court cases housed at UW Green Bay in their library there. Second great grandparents. Yeah. So great grandparents. Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. So you can see this is, again, in a file folder. This one's actually nicely stapled together. So I, just took pictures of each of the pages. Sometimes you have them that they're like super folded, and you have to kind of flatten them a little bit or hold them down a little bit in order to, get a good copy of it or get a good photo of it. But this is an example of a really nice one where it's nice and typed out too, that I can, read through it and figure out what happened in this case. But this was, right after the Great Depression, they lost their house, unfortunately. So they were sued for that money. So again, some of these court records are going to be digitized and available online. So I'll show you some of these great online resources we have. Family Search, completely free, a really great place to start. They have over 300 worldwide probate and court collections, plus a lot of additional unindexed collections where you also want to explore, even though they're unindexed. So I'll dive into Family Search and show you where you can locate this stuff. So again, you always want to make sure you're signed in. I'm already signed in, but if you don't have a free Family Search account, go ahead and create one. You're going to need one in order to research. So once you get into Family Search and you're logged in, you want to click on Search and go to Records. So there's a couple different ways that you can use this page. Of course, right here, I can put in a specific name of somebody. So I can do John Smith, and I can click Search. Of course, there's going to be millions and millions of results, 9 million to be exact. Well, I don't want to look through all of these. I just want to look at the different court records or the probate records. So you can click on Collection over here, and it's going to pop up a little thing on the side here where it's going to narrow down the different topics. So if I'm looking for a birth, marriage, and death record, I would click on this. If I'm looking for census, I'd click on that. So all kinds of different things. If you continue down here, there's one for probate in court. So if I click on that, and then click Apply Collection Filter, it's going to take those 9 million results down to 437,000. Of course, I'm using a very broad general name. If I put my ancestor's name in there or put some details like their birthplace or birth year, it's going to make it more manageable for us. But I just wanted to show you how quickly and easily you could narrow it down to just those probate and court records with your ancestor's name. And anytime you see a little camera icon, that means it's something that you can actually click on and view, that they have the actual image here. So this is just an index, but it's going to talk about, where this person has land and give me reference to another location that I want to search in from the index. So again, you might just get indexes here. You might get actual court records. It depends on all the various collections that they have. This is not the only area where you can search. If we go back to that search and go back to records, there's also a place down here where you can find a collection. So I could type in anything I want in here. I can type in court, and now I can see all the different collections that have the word court in it. I can even do it more narrowed. If I'm looking for Illinois court records, I can do Illinois court. And now I can see, oh, they have district and circuit court naturalization records for this time period. Or for Stark County, they've got naturalizations for this time period. And then I can click on it. And it will usually allow you to search within that collection only for a specific name that you're looking at. One other thing I wanted to point out is reading this little description to see, okay, what am I getting myself into? What kind of records are these? And then they've always got a helpful how to use this collection link. So I always recommend reading through this quick before you dive in a little bit deeper to understand what types of records are in here. It might say something like, oh, we're missing Peoria County or whatever county, or, it has every county except for this. So it will give you a little bit of information. It'll give you some sample images, and you can see, what stuff is covered in here before you dive deeper, because maybe it doesn't actually cover the time period or location that your ancestor would have been included in here. So you don't want to waste a search. Again, this is not the only place that you can search. I also like to use the card catalog. So if we click on search and go to catalog, this brings us into Family Search's catalog. So I usually use this for a specific place. So you could do, very broadly the country, the state, or a specific county within that state, or a specific city within that state. So, just generally we could do like Virginia in the United States. And then I can click on search, and it's going to break down all the different resources in different categories. So there's going to be one for courts. So if I scroll down here, scroll down. Court records, there's going to be 66 collections just in Virginia alone. And so I can, see all these different types of collections that they have, look for a specific time period that maybe my ancestors would have lived there, that I could then go search within that. Some of these might only be accessible offline through Family Search's library in Salt Lake City or some of the Family Search centers. So if you're somebody who's like, I'm not going to go there, I just want to see what's available online, you can also mark this little online button and search that way. And then it's only going to give you those results that would be online that you could for sure search right now. And also keep in mind, especially with regards to court records, you can see there's only 39 now instead of 66. If you come and search for this stuff in the library, we are an affiliate library of Family Search, which means we have access to restricted records that outside of the library, if you're searching at home, you're not going to get as many search results or be able to see all the things that you would be able to see in the library. So they've got affiliate libraries all over the country. They've also got family search centers, which are kind of volunteer-run places, usually in existing churches, where for certain times they might be open, like 4 hours on a Tuesday or 3 hours on a Wednesday. Each one's going to be different, but they also have access to some of those restricted records as well. But I always encourage you to come to the library since we're open a lot more hours than some of those family search centers are. And in order to find your closest location, if you click on the pin up here in Family Search, you can then find a Family Search location near you. And of course, it recognizes that I'm in Appleton, so it's telling me, oh, the Appleton Family Search Center over on Park Ridge, they're open at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, or I can find a different location, and then I can put in, my specific address, and it's going to come up with the specific location. So any of these kind of orange colored ones are going to be those affiliate libraries that are usually in existing public libraries, or the green ones are going to be those volunteer run family search centers. All right, so we've shown the name search, the collection search, and the catalog, but I also mentioned that there's going to be unindexed stuff. There's a lot of unindexed stuff in family search. So in order to find that stuff, you're going to go to search and we're going to go to images. There's also a full text area. They've got like land records and some other things. I think they've got a couple court records in there. Not quite sure on all the locations, but you can also use the full text area. But here in the images spot, you're going to always start with a place. So you can start with a really broad place, like a specific city or a specific state or a specific country, or narrow it down. So for example, I'm going to search for Wisconsin. And you can see I've got, 190,000 results. That's a lot. And not all of them are going to be court records. I can see right away there's a lot of probate records. I can narrow it down to a specific location over here, or there's also something called a life event. So over here, we're going to see there's a legal section. They've got other things like property, migration, death, religious, etc., etc. But if we look at legal, you can see there's legal records, court records, probate records, etc. And I want to make sure to click update because then it's going to narrow it down to just those types of records. And now I can look and see, some of these are just a few pages. If I scroll over, sometimes it will tell me maybe a name of who it might be included. Sometimes it doesn't, unfortunately. It really depends on the different locations. And again, I can also narrow it down more specifically by a specific county. Like if I just wanted Chippewa County, I can narrow it down and then see what's there. And then I'd click on each of these, if that's the time period that I'm looking for. And then it's going to bring me into a bunch of images that I can then scroll through. Sometimes in the beginning or sometimes at the end of these, you might find an index, or it might just be, hey, this is just about one person. So I can see over here, it says Holon Richardson. It must be who this packet is about. So if I click on it, yeah, it looks like it's the will of this person. So if that's my ancestor, great. If not, I'm going to go back to the search results and keep going and click on each of the things. So this is a little bit more painstaking to try to find some of the things. But if you really narrow it down to a specific location, you're more likely to find your ancestors in these. Any questions about family search before we move on to the next one?
That's one of my questions. I was looking for census and then I found.
Yeah. Let's see if there's anything in the chat here. All right. You can also learn a lot more about family search. We did 2 sessions on it last year, where one we just dived specifically into searching, so a little bit more in depth than the few minutes I spent here. And then we've got a whole overview of the website. So these recordings are on our YouTube channel. I've also created a whole user guide on family search that's on our library's website. So if you go to apl.org, I'll show you how to get there. Again, you go to that research and learn and you click on genealogy and local history. That's where you're going to start for basically all the databases.
Just trying to see.
Research and learn, and then genealogy and local history.
I think once I log in, they take me somewhere else.
Yeah, so don't log in.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's.
when you log in, it takes you into our catalog.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay, so
So this is all alphabetized. You can see I've got a couple user guides, a couple video tutorials, and other things for certain databases like Ancestry Library Edition, or lots of other little helpful things here. But we're looking for family search, which I just scrolled past it.
okay.
All right, so right here you can click on the user guide, and I've got 19 pages of information on how to use family search and all the great things about family search that you can look through and learn more about. I've got screenshots in here about, okay, this is how you walk through and create a family search account. This is how you do this thing, etc., etc. So if you're somebody who's fairly new to family search, this might be a great resource for you to look through. And then we've got the accompanying video too.
I didn't quite get there. I'm on.
So click on that research and learn and then scroll down to family search.
Okay.
And then underneath family search, it's got user guide. Did you click on genealogy and local history?
Okay, yes, that's the first.
Okay. All right. So that's a great spot for you to learn more about using the site because I've spent hours just talking about family search. The other great online database that has some court records is going to be Ancestry. So you can either have a paid subscription where they have over 1,000 collections for US courts, and they also have international collections if you have a world subscription. They've got a lot of wills, a lot of probates, some prison records on there. If you don't have a paid subscription, we have the library edition of Ancestry, which still gives you about 950 worldwide collections without needing that extra world subscription. But the majority is going to be North America and Europe. And again, completely free, but you do have to use it in the library. That's the only downfall of it. But we're open quite a bit. So
This is ancestry.com.
this is Ancestry Library Edition. So I'm going to show you how to get there. And again, you have to use this one in the library. You can't do this from home. So you start at apl.org. Again, you go to that research and learn, and you click on genealogy and local history. That's how you're going to get into all of our genealogy and local history databases. And Ancestry Library Edition is the first one, so very helpful. And again, I've got a user guide and a video tutorial down here for you that you can click on and look at as you'd like. But to get into the database, you just click on where it says that name. So now we're in it. So there's kind of two main ways that I like to search in the court records. Of course, you can start right here and type in your ancestor's name and kind of narrow it down like we did with family search. But there's kind of two other places that I like to go. First is the card catalog. So I can click on search and type it or go to the card catalog, which is that last result. And then from here, I can, start narrowing down right away. So I can click on this court, land, wills, and financial, and now I can see, there's 955 different collections. I can sort it by the different date added. I can sort it by record count, date updated, the different collection titles, however you want to sort it. So I can see, oh, this is the biggest databases to the smallest databases. I could also narrow it down by more specific stuff. Like if I know I just want to look at these court, governmental, and criminal records, I can click on that and it's going to narrow it down. I can narrow it down by location. If I know I'm looking USA, if I know I'm looking for a specific state, so maybe I'm looking for Washington, I can click down at Washington and now it's going to narrow it down. Of course, some of these databases or collections are going to be US wide, so that's why you're seeing US ones. But then you can see ones that are just specific to that location that you're searching in.
Where did you get to? I saw on the other side of the chart, like land location.
Yep, so every time you click on one of these blue things, it's going to narrow stuff down for you. Yep, so I narrowed it down to court, land, wills. I started down as everything. So there's all these different categories, and then you can click on court and then narrow it down further. So then you can narrow it down by location, just like I did. Washington. And then again, you can narrow it down even further if you'd like. But say this is the database or collection you want to look in. So maybe it's, this is a long time period, 1856 to 2009. Be aware, not all of the court cases from that time period are going to be in here. They might have a good amount, they might have just a little bit. But what you can do, sometimes you can search within, like it might let you put in your ancestor's name over here. But some of these collections you can only browse in. So that means it's not completely indexed. So what you would do then is you would choose a specific county. So whatever county your family lived in, and then you'd see the different things. So that we've got some declarations of intention, which deal with naturalization. We've got estate files, which deal with probate. We've got homestead records, marriage licenses, more naturalization, letters testamentary, which is dealing with probate records. So all these kinds of different types. So you might have to scroll through and see, oh my gosh, are there any court records in here? Well, here's some orders of the court. Maybe that's what I want to look at. Or here's some probate case files. So again, sometimes it's very limited stuff that they might have in here. It really depends on that specific location of what they've got in here. So you can kind of scroll through and see what they've got. Sometimes you might not get any case files. It might depend on what collection you're looking at or, what county you're looking in. So sometimes you can find stuff in here, sometimes you can't. But this would be, anytime you see something like an index, that's something I would want to click in. And then usually these are alphabetical then. So I'd go to whatever, letter the last name starts with. And then I'd look at, okay, what book number and what page number, what date? Do they've got a case file number? These are all details that I want if I'm going to try to find this actual case or find out more information. So maybe I can find it somewhere online. Maybe I have to reach out to this county offline and see, how do I get access to this 1902 record? I've got a case file number, I've got a book number, a page number, whatever you found from the index, and figure out from the local library there or local archive there how you would go about researching. Or, again, maybe start at Family Search Wiki and see, okay, do they have any Adams County, Washington court records for this type of court case that I'm looking at online? So sometimes you got to do a little digging in order to find that stuff. Also, another easy place to get to some of these court records, if you start again at that homepage of Ancestry Library Edition, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, they've got some quick links down here. So we've got a category for tax, criminal, land, and wills. This isn't going to include every single thing, but again, we've got some different types of things like court, governmental, and criminal records. And then you could search your ancestor's name, for example. So I'm just going to use John Smith again because he seems like he would be in the court records. And now I've got, a bunch of results. Again, I can use these things over here to narrow it down a little bit. But I can see, oh, here's an Ireland prison register for a John Smith who, was admitted in 1846. So I've got a little bit of like a snapshot of it when I first hover over it. And then I can click on the image to be brought into that actual image. So now I can see, oh, here's a register of prisoners committed to this specific prison, and you can see their names and their ages, what crimes, when they were committed, by who, from where, when were they tried, by who, and get some more information. So here's their sentence, here's when they were discharged, all these kind of great things. We've got a physical description, what their occupation was. So you can see all these kind of cool things just from a snapshot. You can see, oh, he was not guilty of assault and robbery. Good for you. Or you can see, oh, look at, he had to, be transferred to the jail, or he had 14 days in jail, or whatever it was. And so even without looking at that whole case file, you at least have a little idea of what happened with that case. But then if you find that case file, you might get some more juicy details of what happened.
That was from Ireland?
This is from Ireland.
Oh.
So the Ancestry Library Edition does have international collections for free in the library. So
Someone's handwriting.
this is somebody's handwriting, yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they're easy to read, sometimes they're not. Yeah. They have neat handwriting compared to some other people. So yeah, that's using Ancestry Library Edition to find some of these court types of records. Uh, One source that you can use from home, just like Family Search, you can use from home, but Family Search, you get more access to stuff in the library. But this one's called Heritage Quest. It's also owned by Ancestry, but you can use this completely from home as long as you live in Wisconsin. So remember, earlier in the session, we looked at those maps in Heritage Quest. So we're going to go right back the same way, research and learn, genealogy and local history. We're going to go back down to Heritage Quest. Click the link through Badger Link, and then we're in. So this has less collections than Ancestry Library Edition, but the benefit is that you can search it from home. So if you go to search, this is going to bring you to some of the categories. You can also type in an ancestor's name now, which is something they more recently added to Heritage Quest that's a little easier to find some stuff. But you can see right here from a snapshot, oh, they've got wills and probates. Now I can search within wills and probates to see if I can find my ancestors in these records. So these are some different states that have wills and probates, which we'll look at a little further next month. But these are some that you could get a jump start on since those are going to be most of the court cases that are online. The other thing I wanted to show you is if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you can search in other locations. So of course, right away it's going to show you some US locations, but there's even more US records than these that they popped up here. There's also international countries, again, that you can get completely for free from home for those Wisconsin residents, or if you're not in Wisconsin, check with your local library, see if you have Heritage Quest. But you can click on something like more US records, and now I can look and see there's a lot of other US records. A little tip, if you have a Windows computer, there's the control button and the F button. If you click them at the same time, you're going to get this little box that pops up. So what you can do is you can actually type in a keyword. So I typed in court. Now it's going to show me, oh, there's a court collection from North Carolina. There's one from the state Supreme Court. I can keep on clicking this arrow and it's going to bring me to the next result of where it sees that word on this page. So now I can just really quickly, instead of scrolling through this whole thing and trying to see court in there, now I can see, oh, Jefferson County, Ohio, they've got some court records in here. And then I can click on it and be brought into that collection. So this one's going to show us, oh, we've got some county court records, the hospital records, pensions, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see all the great stuff that they have in here. So this is more council proceedings and civil dockets, but again, it might be that thing that you need to help you locate that file offline or locate it somewhere else online. So you'll see the name of that case and that case file number, which is that really important thing that you're going to need to get access to that case file if it still exists. And of course, there's other international countries in Heritage Quest that they might have some records as well. You can learn more about using Ancestry Library Edition and Heritage Quest. We did a whole session walking through parts of the site. Again, it's on our YouTube channel here. And then I've got a user guide for Ancestry Library Edition that you can find on our APL website, just like we did before with Family Search. So you can dive deeper and learn a lot more about those because we're already an hour in our session, and I don't want to spend all afternoon talking all about all the websites. Another great resource is MyHeritage. Unfortunately, this site does require a paid subscription, but they have over 15 million records across 93 different collections in regards to court records. They're primarily going to be US court records and European court records, but if you have exhausted the other resources and you can't maybe travel to a specific place, maybe you can see if they're on Heritage or MyHeritage and see if you're able to get access to them. But remember, what you see online, just a small portion of all the available court records. Many are still only accessible offline. You have to go to that courthouse, that archives, that library that's going to house some of these court records for that specific location. So remember, a few minutes ago I showed you, oh, I found a court record, the whole case file for my ancestors at UW Green Bay's Area Research Center in their library, because that's how Wisconsin does it, is we have these area research centers all around the state. Another way that you can find out, hey, how do I get these off-site court records? I always start with that Family Search Wiki. So again, we're going to say that state name, that country name, and those court records. Sometimes it gives you a good background on what courts there are. It gives you links to some of those online collections. There's also going to be an archives and libraries section. So again, you type in that name. So I typed in New York court records. I've got links to online resources here, specifically for New York. I've got some background information. This one's a really good one. It's got different information about the types of crimes and all that stuff. But one thing I wanted to point out over here on the right-hand side, they've got this section called Local Research Resources. The first one is archives and libraries. So if you click on that, it's going to talk to you about all these different repositories that would feature this specific state's records. So I can see, oh, there's the Huguenot Society, there's the National Archives at New York City, there's the New York Public Library. And usually it's going to give you a little description of, okay, they have microfilm of all the censuses and naturalization records and court records, et cetera, et cetera. If I see court records, I'm going to contact them and say, hey, what court records do you have? Or I'm going to explore their website, figure out what years or what counties they might have. And maybe it's that county and that time period that I'm looking for my ancestors. And then I can follow up with them offline to get access to those if I can't travel there. So if you keep scrolling, they've got lots and lots of resources for some of these states where you can find lots of details. Sometimes they list more specific things. Sometimes it's just very basic, but you always get a nice link to their website where you can learn a little bit more about that specific repository. And again, you can do that for the countries as well. So
It's a location.
repository is like a archive or a library. It's like a specific location. So it could be a courthouse, it could be a library, it could be an archive. There's multiple different things. Yes. So once you find those offline records, after you found that place where they're housed, they might be on microfilm. Maybe you get that original paper form. Maybe they're going to be in bound huge volumes. Every place is going to be different. Some records might even be stored off-site, or maybe they were transferred somewhere else. So you always want to contact that place in order to see in advance. Before you go there, make sure I've got the correct place. You're going to be open when I'm coming, right? Staff sometimes are really nice, and maybe they'll pull a case file. If you happen to have that case file, they have it ready for you to go. Or if you need to look at the indexes yet, you say, hey, I want to come and look at the circuit court index for this time period, and they'll have it ready to go sometimes for you. Or maybe you have access to an index online that you found on Family Search or on Ancestry, and you just make a list of those file numbers or any other reference to, a box number or a folder number, a volume number, a page number, any of that stuff that it's giving you, you want to write that down because it's going to make it easier for you to find that information offline. I also like to look in the local newspapers. So we talked all about newspapers in 2 different sessions last summer. So if you missed those, go to our YouTube channel because there's lots of great information on newspapers. But look at those newspapers where your ancestor lived. They might even have notices buried under other articles. So you can see this article, the headline is Burglary Charges Are Lodged Against Keeble. Well, it's talking about this guy, John Keeble, who's charged with burglary. And it's talking about him for a little bit, but then I go down to the last paragraph and it says, oh, another case brought before the justice was that of Archie Gillis and Mrs. William Delvo of Oconto Falls, charged with adultery. And so now I know, hey, if those are my ancestors, like I've got a time period of when this court would have heard that case. And I know what the charge was, so now I've got information that I can then go and see if I can find that court record for. Unfortunately, this was one of my ancestors, the burglary guy, but still, you can find lots of other little tidbits hidden under other articles. If your ancestor was involved in a lengthy trial or something really newsworthy, you might even find multiple articles to give you a lot more context, even without the case file. So, Henry Keeble was a brother of my great-grandfather who had quite the history in the court system. So I found multiple articles of him doing lots of fun things, like declaring moonshine was the reason for him, forging stuff. So you can find lots of fun stuff on here. And don't forget that with your library card, you have access to a lot of free databases, a lot of newspaper databases, like we've got newspapers.com library edition, or this resource I used was Digitize Oconto County. Oconto County has a great genealogy society that has digitized a lot of their historic newspapers, that their website's just freely open for anybody. You don't even need a library card. And again, sometimes within these articles, it references other cases. So it's saying, oh, I can see, this case is heard before the circuit court judge on a specific date. And then it says, oh, he had just been released from the Minnesota penitentiary at St. Cloud. Well, now I know I've got to look for another case file on this guy. So you can kind of piece together some things or give you little hints that, hey, now I know I need to follow up with Minnesota, see if I can get that record. And there's also, at certain times, legal notice sections in the newspaper. So you can see something like this. Oh, this is a notice of sale in regards to, let's see, a foreclosure. So it's the state of Wisconsin against this person, and it's giving you information, and it's talking about, when this court is going to hear this case. So again, you've got, a time period that you can then go back and follow up with the specific municipal court in that county and see if they have access to that case file yet or what you can find in those court records. I got some resources on criminal court records in your handout. I mean, we could talk for a while on criminal court cases. Just a small sampling of stuff in your handout. But the really big point I wanted to make was if they were convicted and went to prison, follow up and try to get that prison case file if they exist, because they sometimes have mugshots. So this was another brother of one of my great-grandfathers, so brother to Henry, who was the moonshine guy. He counterfeited money, and so he served in federal prison for counterfeiting some money. And I've got a, great headshot of what he looked like at this time. I've got his case file of who visited him, who wrote him letters. They even ask for genealogy information, like who his parents were and stuff like that. So you'd be surprised at what they have in prison records. It's not all just the naughty stuff.
Can we get to this from?
So this I actually got through the National Archives. So I had to actually order it. It was offline, but I didn't want to go to Kansas City where the records were because he served in Leavenworth. So I just wrote them and paid for it, and they emailed it to me like a couple weeks later. So super simple to do that. I've got a link in your handout about ordering through the National Archives.
Yeah.
Yes.
Still living.
If he's still living, I don't know. It depends on if they allow if they restrict it or not. But he was long deceased by this point.
That's pretty cool.
I also wanted to point out, if you're searching for those ancestors in Wisconsin, here's a map of the different area research centers we have around the state. So you can see each of the stars represents one of our colleges in Wisconsin. And then you can see the counties that surround that star are where you're going to find records. So for example, UW Green Bay is right here. So Outagamie, Calumet, Manitowoc, Kewaunee, Dorr, etc., all these records are going to be held there at Green Bay. If I'm looking at Winnebago County or Fond du Lac County or Green Lake, that's going to be at UW Oshkosh. So they have some of those older records throughout the state based on where that county was and what the closest college is. So if you're looking for an older court record in Wisconsin, you're going to want to follow up with the Wisconsin area research centers. So one of those research centers, for example, is UW Green Bay. Sometimes they even have great indexes integrated into their websites. So UW Green Bay is one of them. So you can do search and request records right here. And they've got a spot where you can search by name. So those Keeble brothers, they were trouble. So I'd type in that last name. And if I wanted to, I could narrow it down by county or by a collection type. But I'm just going to pop in their last name. Sometimes it takes a minute to search, but um, if you narrow it down a little bit, it shouldn't take that long to search. So now I've got some results down here. So I can see at a glance, we've got some probate records. Here's a court case file for Henry. I can see the year, and then I can click on more information. So it's going to say, oh, he was the defendant. He was charged with burglary. Here's a box number, a folder number, a call number. Here's, probably the person who brought the charge against him. And if I didn't want to go visit there, I could pay $10 and order it and pay for it online. And then in a few days or a few weeks, they'd send me a copy of this court case.
So typically, could that be like 1 page or 30 pages? You just don't.
You just never know. This one I think was 10 pages. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to pay $10 for 10 pages when I live in Green Bay and can easily go. So, but for those who don't live in this area, this, might be a fairly cheap way for you to get copies of these old Wisconsin court cases. I think it's fairly reasonable, $10 for a court case. So I've seen places that charge a lot more. So I can't remember what it was through the National Archives to get that prison court case, but it was definitely more than $10. But it was worth it. So here is a copy of that court case that, again, I got offline. But using that kind of citation that I found on their website, it made it really easy. By the time I got there, they had that box pulled for me. I could go right to folder 12 and then start making copies of it. So just quickly, I scanned in all 10 pages for you guys, just so you can kind of see, like, this is the extent sometimes of a court case. It's, sometimes you get these nice typed pages where it talks about, okay, he was charged with entering a garage and stealing stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So I can read through this and see, okay, this is what happened, and this is what he's charged with, and this is what they're alleging. So, sometimes it's just a few pages. Sometimes it could be 30 pages or 100 pages. Again, you just never know. So these are kind of what you might have in store for you for certain court cases. I also find it really helpful to create a timeline. So when I'm reviewing court cases, especially if your ancestor is in them a little bit, or like with Henry Keeble, who was in the newspaper a lot, I kept a timeline of, okay, on June 14th, 1923, he's declaring moonshine's a problem. And then in November 1923, he's, getting in trouble with this, or he's in jail. And just so I can, keep track of what he's doing and what court cases I need to follow up with in, because sometimes he had multiple ones going on. So now I've got a little bit of a timeline of what's going on with him and what he's getting in trouble for. Another really great resource that I've got at the end of your handout shows you some court resources by state. So they've got this really great map through the Department of Justice. You might need to prove that you're not a robot. But then when you scroll down here, we've got court resources by state. So you can, again, click on whatever state you want to. So Colorado, for example. Now I can see all these different links for the different types of courts, and I can learn more. Like if I know my ancestor had a court case in the Colorado Supreme Court, maybe I'm going to go look at these, and I can see, oh, they've got maybe some stuff from 1997 to present, but that's not going to help me. Or I can go learn more about what they've got on here. They've got an inmate locator, so you kind of just never know what kind of helpful links that they're going to have in these specific states that you can then follow up on to learn more about researching in that state or giving you resources for that state.
Are the newer cases available under Freedom of Information?
I would think that they would be under Freedom of Information Act. I guess it maybe depends on what type of case, and I would think, though. I mean, I guess I've never tried myself.
Well, yeah, because we're
to get a more. I'm concerned about the dead people. So that's what I've got for you. Our next session, again, we're going to dive completely into probate records. Even though that's a court record, it's just such an extensive and great genealogy resource that I want to talk about it really in depth. So we're going to do that on March 24th at 2 p.m. Same time, same place. In the meantime, we've got our next Find Your Ancestors session on Saturday, March 14th at 2 p.m., where we're going to host Lisa Vogel, who is going to talk about how to find your ancestral village. So if you're somebody who's like, gosh, I just know my ancestors were from Germany or from Ireland, you need a more specific spot than Germany or Ireland. You want to find a specific name of a hometown or a village. So she's going to give us some resources and some strategies on how to narrow it down so that you can find that specific place to start searching in. Because if you're trying to search for Germany, that's a needle in a haystack with the names of your ancestors. So mark your calendars for that and join us then. Happy to answer any questions. Again, remember, I'm not a lawyer. There's only so much I know about the law and legal stuff, but happy to answer any questions. Someone asked, does free access at the library also have newspapers.com and Fold3? Yes. So if you go back to apl.org, again, if you click on that Research and Learn tab, it will show you all the different databases we have, A to Z. But of course, those genealogy and local history ones, if you know that's what you're searching for, you can see all these different databases we have. So we've got Fold3 Library Edition. If we scroll further down, we've got newspapers.com Library Edition. We've got lots of other resources. So if you have an APL card, you have access to all this stuff. Some of the stuff you don't even need a library card for.
But you don't need to be in.
You don't need to be in the library except for Ancestry Library Edition, and then to get access to the restricted family search stuff. So usually if you're at home, it will show you, hey, this is restricted. You can access it at an affiliate library. Then you want to write down that collection name or what you were searching for, and then next time you're in the library, pull that record up, and then you'd have access to those images unrestricted. But it has to say affiliate library. If it says Family Search Center, that means you have to go to that one that's on Park Ridge, or wherever your closest family search center is.
Is Fold3 military?
Fold3 is military. So in May, we're going to dive into military records and I'll show you a lot more about Fold3. It's not just military records. They do have some non-military records, but that's what most people associate Fold3 with is military, because Fold3 stands for the three folds of the flag. Any other questions here?
Yeah, I just have a comment. I went to the war
Mhm.
and they have records of when people came over on the ship
Okay.
to the United States and to what port they were
Mhm.
in. So I don't know if they still have that or not, but that was a nice research.
Yeah. Yeah, so we talked all about like naturalization and immigration. I think it was last October. So if you missed those sessions, we do have them recorded online if you want to learn more about resources that you could find for your own ancestors if they weren't on that list.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I get into my TV and still onto YouTube and.
Yeah.
My husband will be happy to watch.
Yes. You can watch hours and hours of me talking about genealogy, guys.
No, his friend has that, a site for that information too, right?
Yes, but that would just be for the port of New York.
Oh,
There's lots more ports than just New York.
Right.
All right, let's see if there's one more question here. Can today's Zoom be viewed again? Yes, I have recorded it and it will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow. I always record these sessions because I don't mind if you guys listen to me again. So.
Uh-huh.
All right, thanks everybody. I hope you
you.
enjoyed it and learned a lot and can now go find those ancestors in some court records. So good luck.
Well, how many people did the Zoom?
It looks like there's 30 some on right now. So. Oh, someone asked how to find the regional UW libraries. So if you just go to Google and type in Wisconsin Area Research Centers, and you can see the first result is that Wisconsin Area Center Network, and it's going to show you that map that I pulled up. And once you kind of figure out what college it was, they've got the links down here. So I can go to UW Green Bay, I can go to Whitewater, I can go to Platteville, et cetera, and it's going to bring me right into that area research center. So here's UW Oshkosh, for example. Of course, these all have university history as well, but if you're looking just specifically for genealogy, they usually have a genealogy section as well. And again, a lot of them have great indexes on here as well, or it will give you like a snapshot overview of some of the different things that they have. So, I can see, oh, what are the local holdings for naturalization records? And it will give you a time period, for example, or court records. Here's what are the local civil cases for the different counties, and this is what they've got. So you kind of know from a snapshot, hey, is it worth a trip to this college or to reach out to them? Or is it somewhere else? So
I have a question. If previous to, well, I guess maybe it was after our statehood in Wisconsin, but if before the counties were that word.
formed, yeah.
So they purchased land and it was in Winnebago County, but then at some point it became Wood County
Yeah.
or Allegheny County.
Mhm.
Where would they have the original record?
In Winnebago County.
In Winnebago County. Okay.
Yes. All right. Let's see if there's any other things. All right, everybody, that's it. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions in the meantime. Take care.